So I was perusing the internet the other day in search of stuff to laugh at, when naturally I happened upon an update for Season 3 of Rings of Power, which is apparently shooting over here in the UK and is likely to last until the end of the year. And because shows like this need about another decade of post-production, that means we're unlikely to see a third season until at least 2027, 3 entire years since the previous season.
Oh no! What happened?
Damn man, wars have been fought and won in that time. And it's not alone in this either. The final season of Stranger Things comes out in November, 3 years since the last episode aired. Last of Us Season 2 came out 2 full years after the previous season, and for the handful of people excited for Season 3, well, you're gonna have to wait until 2027 for that, boyo.
Oh shucks.
And all of this stuff got me to thinking, man, TV kinda sucks now.
Fuck.
Maybe not so much in the content department, although I could definitely make an argument about that. But the whole shooting structure and business model is completely ass backwards now. Gone are the days when you'd get a new season of your favourite show every year, so you could always feel excited and invested in it. And I mean an actual season of 20 or even 24 episodes, not the 8-episode miniseries, or 5 in some cases, that are laughably pretending to be TV seasons nowadays. Gone are the days of episodic storytelling, where each new week brought a new adventure or some interesting new self-contained storyline, where writers were encouraged to experiment and take chances and try wildly creative new ideas. Now everything has got to be serialised, everything has to be in service of one big overarching storyline, and at a certain point, well, it gets pretty fucking boring, man. And not just that, it gets exhausting. Like you can't afford to miss a single episode or you'll have no idea what's going on. It becomes like homework, something that you constantly have to stay updated on. And how can I put this? It's just not very entertaining anymore. But more than that, it creates a lot of problems that I don't think studios fully appreciate. So why not talk about them right here and now? The first big problem is a loss of momentum. A full 22 episode season of TV with a weekly release schedule would last almost half the year, meaning that there might only be a 6-month gap between the end of one season and the start of the next. This was really important because it meant that the show was never really out of public consciousness. Just as the conversation about the last season was dying down, the hype train for the next season would start to build up again. It was good because it kept the fan base engaged and enthused, and it meant that people always had a good sense of where the show was at and what was happening. Now imagine the difference when you have to wait 2 or even 3 years between seasons. You don't need me to tell you that a whole lot of stuff can happen in that time, especially now because, let's be honest, we live in a world of constant distractions. There's a million other shows, movies, games, books, news reports about the impending collapse of society, and highly sexy but slightly intoxicated YouTubers from Scotland, all vying for our very limited time and attention. Fan bases, fickle and terminally online as they are, can just as easily drift away to other shows and IPs during that 3-year gap, or just lose interest entirely because they've forgotten what your show is even about. And even if they do somehow stick around until your next season, you then have to waste precious time reminding them about everything that's happened up until now, because it's been so long since the last season happened that half your audience has forgotten what's even going on now. Take House of the Dragon, for example. That was a pretty good show, right? Yeah, arguably it's a bit fucking slow and ponderous at times, and it could probably use a few less miserable people standing around in badly lit castles looking at maps, but overall it's well written, well acted and well produced, and a nice little comeback after the disaster of Game of Thrones. The problem is that 2-year gap between seasons absolutely killed its momentum, which is why the audience declined more than 20% from seasons 1 to 2.
Are you serious?
And with season 3 at least another year away, what do you think that's going to do for the show's ratings? Another problem that's beginning to rear its ugly head, especially with younger actors, is aging. Kids grow up fast, especially if you happen to cast them when they're like 11 or 12 years old. I mean, take Stranger Things for example, and compare the actors from season 1 to what they look like now. They're still supposed to be playing this plucky band of young teenagers, but they all look about 30 years old now, and at a certain point it just gets fucking weird. Then you also realise it's been almost a decade since the show premiered, and in that time they've made a grand total of of 5 seasons, one of which isn't even out yet. Now imagine if they'd been able to release a season every year. They could have had the whole thing wrapped up by 2021, and they wouldn't be facing the uncomfortable prospect of having to keep using actors like Millie Bobby Brown, who now look like middle-aged cocktail waitresses from Vegas. Although I have to admit, it does kind of make me laugh when shows run into the exact opposite problem sometimes, like The Last of Us, who cast a child-sized Bella Ramsey to play a young Ellie, probably assuming she'd grow up and age noticeably between seasons to account for the 5-year time jump, only to discover that she still looked like a fucking 10-year-old when it was time to start shooting again. Boy, did you guys gamble and lose on that one. The other thing I really miss about TV today is episodic storytelling, not knowing what kind of wacky, creative, thought-provoking, or downright weird adventure my favourite characters would get caught up in this week. It brought in a much-needed sense of variety and unpredictability to TV shows, where you felt like almost anything could happen, instead of just grinding forward with the same storyline you've been following for years. It also gave the writers a chance to branch out sometimes, take a few creative risks, and try stuff that was just a little bit different. Yeah, the gamble didn't always pay off, usually when they allowed one of the lead actors to write and direct an episode, something they were absolutely not qualified to do, and you could definitely tell when the writers had run out of ideas and just slapped together a bunch of flashbacks instead, but that was part of the charm of the whole thing. Sometimes it didn't work out, but most of the time it did, and if not, well, you had about 22 other episodes to choose from that season. And yeah, I know Alex Kurtzman's idiotic idea of modern Star Trek is still trying to do episodic storytelling, but let's be honest, no one cares about that because nobody watches that fucking garbage now. Obviously, I'm not saying that every show's got to be like that, and I totally get that certain settings or IPs don't lend themselves to episodic storytelling, but I feel like we've swung so far towards serialized storytelling that nobody even does it anymore. Everything now has to be about pushing one grand narrative forward, one painful step at a time, with multi-year gaps in between. The last thing I'm getting pretty sick of is studios turning movie scripts into TV series without bothering to ask if there's even enough material for it. Marvel and Star Wars are especially guilty of this shit, where you can tell they had the story outlined for a 2-hour theatrical movie and instead stretched it out into a 6-episode miniseries instead, without really knowing how they were going to fill in all that extra time. What you end up with is either painful time-killing filler episodes where nobody accomplishes much of anything, or characters who get caught up in tedious busy work just to give them something to do. It's so fucking lazy and unnecessary, and it results in a flabby, inefficient show that nobody's excited about. I guess what I'm saying with this long, rambling rant is that more and more now, I find myself checking out of TV shows these days. I just don't have the time, the emotional investment, or the sheer mental energy to get through 10-hour serialized narratives like that anymore. Season 2 of Peacemaker might turn out to be the single greatest thing ever to grace our TV screens, but I'll probably never know about it because I just can't be arsed watching it now. House of the Dragon Season 3 will probably be another season of solid, well-crafted, but slightly stodgy fantasy TV, but by the time it eventually comes out, I honestly don't know if I give enough of a shit to watch it. The final season of Stranger Things could see the world's most shot-out group of teenagers finally bring their decade-long story to a close, but after so long, do I even care how it all ends? I don't know, man, and I suspect a lot of other people are starting to feel the same way. One thing's for sure though, the current model of TV just isn't working anymore. Something's got to change, and if I'm right, it has to change sooner rather than later. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.